This is a treat for me. Kirk Huff, thank you for coming on to the podcast, man.
Oh, no problem.
So before we were actually starting, you actually were talking about how like you've been thinking about doing a podcast yourself about paranormal activity and conspiracy theories.
Yeah, I'm super into that stuff. I would like just to. I thought it'd be cool to do like people in the St. Louis area that had like paranormal events, like get them to share their story. And some of it's interesting. Some like this person's crazy.
What's the threshold?
Yeah. I don't know. Sometimes you interview people and you can clearly tell like you would have called the police if these events happened to you.
So I was in the second floor of the building. The lights just shut off, and before I knew it, I had fingers in my butt. Like, does anyone else live in this building? My roommate. I'm sure it was a ghost.
That's happened to me before a few times.
Ass up, lock his ass up. You're going to jail. You're going to jail.
Good. No, I think if you want to start a podcast, I think I tell this to everybody: do it. It's been an immense joy for us and a lot of fun. So, I mean, if you got an idea for one, I mean, best case scenario, you start it and people love it. Worst case scenario, you start it and you have fun conversations and no one watches it. It's a win-win.
I mean, it's like, yeah, you just talk to people that you might not have another opportunity to like just sit down and talk with for an hour.
Yeah, I can tell you this. I've actually one of the cool things about starting a podcast that I didn't know until after I did it was you start talking to people, and this is gonna sound so stupid, but it's true. You just learn a lot from how they extrapolate their lived experiences, what they've been through, some of their examples on whatever it is that you're talking about. I've learned things about OnlyFans, Twitch streaming, owning a gym, touring companies, and law enforcement. I've learned things about government and business and entrepreneurship and mentorship. It's been I learned things about suit making. So I mean, it's been an enjoyable couple of months for me. And if you're thinking about kind of going down that path, I would strongly recommend it.
Yeah, maybe.
Well, outside of that, one of the big reasons why I had you on was to talk about you. But if we may before, can you explain to me what happened with Josh Augustine? Why did that fucking blow up? Because I thought you guys trained together at St. Charles MMA. I thought you guys were tight.
Yeah, so I've taught the morning class there for a long time. He was in my morning class. I did Worlds with him in, I think, 2009.
Jiu-jitsu.
Yeah, and I think probably most of, if I'm getting his story right, he was dating a girl there that went to my morning class. They broke up. There wasn't many girls in the class. I said, hey, you can come train at my gym. And that he took that as like me trying to talk to his girlfriend.
His ex-girlfriend.
His ex-girlfriend, yeah.
Now, when was this? Like years ago?
This had to be 2 years ago, I think.
So he's bringing this up now to fight you in MMA?
Well, he kind of said something like a year ago about fighting.
When he was on the juice?
Probably. I don't know when that started, but
Because I had gone like 5 years without seeing him. And I remember he was like on a Shamrock card. And I mean, he was fighting at like 170. I was like, Josh doesn't fight 170. He's a featherweight. And then when I saw him, I was like, Jesus Christ. Either you hit like different puberty than me or something's in the milk.
yeah, second puberty.
Second puberty.
So I think a lot of his anger probably stems from that. And then she's moved to Colombia and doesn't even train there anymore. But I invite everybody to come, and I do invite more girls because there for a while about half my class was female. So a lot of the girls I tried to get to all train, and I'm trying to think. We had one incident at the gym.
When you say the gym, forgive me.
St. Charles MMA. So I was doing a jiu-jitsu competition class. He showed up late, and we're doing a specific drill. And he comes in, and he's doing the drill wrong to some degree. It's like a guard passing drill. And Justin Bricker says, hey, you're doing the drill wrong, blah, blah, blah. And he goes on a rant how he's the best. And the best
in jiu-jitsu?
Yeah, I guess. I don't know what he was
Is he a
referring
black belt?
No, I think he's purple.
Does he know how that works?
I mean, and he kept going, saying I'm the best guy in the gym. I was like, then eventually I'm like, Josh, you're not the best. Like, you want to prove it? I put him in an arm bar, and I was like, beg me not to break your arm. Beg me not to break your arm. To make an example of him being like,
to try to humble him.
yeah. And then we kind of smooth things over. And then shortly after, I guess he breaks away from St. Charles MMA, and we had a conversation. And I guess he felt people at the gym had turned their back on him. That I'm like, dude, I'm so far removed from all the fighters there. Like, I didn't turn my back on you. I started a gym 40 miles away. Like,
Arnold BJJ.
yeah, I don't even run MMA. So I get maybe mad about me inviting his ex-girlfriend to train, me armbarring him. And then I think overall, as much as like a personal thing that he's upset with me, he thinks I'm a very easy win. Like, I haven't fought in 10 years. I bet you I put MMA gloves on less than 5 times in this decade. And I have a decent record, 4-1. And if he's young and in training and shape, and I get up off the couch, I probably would be an easy win, you know?
Yeah.
like, but
You're basically saying, like, dude, when I was, young and hungry, I wasn't looking for guys that were like, I wouldn't say you're retired because you're still competing in jiu-jitsu. But like you haven't, like you said, you haven't fought in MMA in how long?
yeah,
And to be called out is just personally, I'm 2 years removed, right? So
Yeah.
I've stopped fighting 2 years ago. No one calls me out. So like why? Because I'm not fighting. Calling me out is kind of like useless. This is where when I saw that post, I was thinking to myself, the first thing I thought to myself was, isn't Kirk like retired? I thought you were retired from fighting. I know you're doing jiu-jitsu competition, but from MMA perspective, I thought you were retired.
I mean, I never like I'm retired, but I don't really have much interest in it. Like, yeah, if maybe one day I thought about doing one, but like right now that interest levels. Maybe it's because I'm attached to St. Charles MMA when he has animosity towards them. Maybe it's a combination of all three. But I think he's like justifying like he wants that easy win because what he's like I think 4-3, 4-3. If he gets another, he thinks that's like his super easy meal ticket of a fight, and like
To keep a winning record.
yeah, I get one over on St. Charles MMA. I get a winning record, and if a win over me propels you to the UFC, they've really lowered their standards of like
I don't mean to be rude when I say this, but is he delusional in this aspect of like, does he think that a win over you, and forgive me if this sounds like an insult because I'm not trying to sound insulting, but a win over you doesn't really mean anything because you've been out so long.
exactly. Yeah, that's what I'm trying to say. It's not like I'm like I get my feelings hurt by anybody saying that because that is the absolute truth. I'm so far removed from sport, and who I've beaten, I haven't beaten anybody great. I had three or one of my 4-1. One was a DQ. Haven't beat anybody great as a pro. Had one loss versus a subpar fighter. Like in the realm of regional fighting, even then I was like not the highest level, and now I'm the bottom of the barrel. Even if my record says 4-1,
I
it's
understand what
like
you're saying. Terribly sorry to interrupt the content that you're enjoying right now, but if you've been watching our content for the past couple of months, you realize that Easy Talk is a brand new podcast. We're genuinely trying to figure this thing out as we're going. Some growing pains for sure. If you are genuinely enjoying this content, we feel very humble in that, but we would like to ask that you would also subscribe and like to the channel, simply because it does help us in the algorithms and ultimately to grow. So take a second. I'd really appreciate it. And on with the show.
yeah, I don't get my feelings hurt by that at all. That's just the truth.
What happened to you, the best of your knowledge? You might not know, and if you don't know, then just be like, "Here, that's not about me." Why does he have so much animosity? Was it something you guys did to him? Did he leave the gym? Kirk. I'm trying to piece this together because none of this makes sense to me. You know what I mean? I can understand like calling you out because he thinks it's an easy fight. But then when all of the correspondence happened and everyone started getting involved, like Sean Woodson and everybody else, when Sean said you're not even respected in your own city, I couldn't even imagine. Because I've been kind of removed from that, I don't know I don't want to say the drama, but I don't know the circumstances that led to this moment.
I watched Danny Wright's podcast with him, and Josh said a little bit more there that I guess he felt his girlfriend at the time was talking to multiple guys at the gym, and he wanted them kicked out And Mike said that's like your personal problem, which I have no idea what his
Ex-girlfriend at the time.
I guess.
So they broke up, and he was getting upset because she's talking to other guys at the gym.
I guess. And
Jesus Christ. How old is he?
I think he's about 30 now.
Jesus Christ.
So yeah, I guess that was a big factor why he was upset. Maybe he felt like he wasn't getting the best training because he talks about how I'm at. Because I had a like personally, I messaged him other than chat, and he seems to be very proud that he's at Extreme Couture and training. I think he said he's training with my idols, which I have no idols at Extreme Couture. I mean, there's good fighters there, but those guys aren't my idols.
I don't understand what that means. Does that make him like some sort of like superior athlete?
If I had to guess, and I'm not trying to insult him, I feel like he probably has to build up his self-esteem.
Yeah.
Like, maybe that's why he's taking a lot of steroids. Is like, you got to build up this sense of security even to get in the cage. And if he talks himself up, maybe he has more confidence. The fight, and it's like, oh, I train with the
who's who of MMA,
and they bring me in the train. I'm like, that's awesome. And he's like, you train at a gym in the Midwest that's nobody. And I said, well, I don't fight. Grapple me. I'll give you $5,000 if you beat me.
What, in a jiu-jitsu match?
And if you beat me, I'll fight you in MMA. He said no. I said 10K.
So you returned the offer and said, hey, I will compete against you, but in the sport that I'm currently competing in.
And if you beat me, I'll fight you in MMA.
And he
said no.
Like,
which in this video, I'll send all the screenshots. And I'm like, if you're training with these guys and I'm just a bum from the Midwest, you can easily beat me in grappling.
Well, because that's not what he wants. What
Right.
he wants is to pad his record.
He wants these and win. But I was more or less insulted that he was making fun of gyms in the Midwest. Like,
well, who are you? Meaning, who is he to say anything about gyms in the Midwest? I'm not trying to sound rude when I say this. I was 6-1 before I lost my last one. I'm 6-2, right? I was like a highly touted prospect. And then when I got the last loss, I was like, you know what? Like, I'm 31. I'm not going to get any younger. Actually, at the time I was 30. I just turned 30. I was like, I'm not going to get any younger. Father Time is not my ally at this point, and there's other things I could do with my time that are just like more lucrative and better spent, right? So like I took that initiative to just kind of take a step back. I probably could have competed. I probably could have got like another couple wins. I lost to a world beater. Doesn't necessarily mean I quote unquote suck, right?
Right.
But like even I wasn't talking shit on the local gyms. I wasn't saying that St. Charles is trash or Wolves Den is trash or any of this stuff. So like I'm not trying to sound rude when I say this. You're fucking 4-3. Who the fuck are you to talk about anybody's gym? You're not credentialed enough to open your own gym. Right. So shut the fuck up.
Yeah, I don't. Maybe it's. I couldn't tell you. A delusion might be a thing, or. Yeah, I couldn't tell you.
I don't know either. I genuinely hope well for him. I don't think fighting is going to be for him. Not because he just shoots steroids in his ass, but for just like the actual fighting skill. He's just not a good fighter.
I mean, like the conversation, and he insulted me. He's like, you don't have money to pay your gym dues, and he made fun of me like, you don't have health insurance. And I sent him a private. This is when he blocked me, which I'll prove. I'll go to my bank account right now. I'm not extremely wealthy, mind you. I'll take a picture of my bank account if you do the same, and we post it simultaneously. Which I tell you, like, I'm not well off.
But you're very confident that it's still more than his.
I bet you it is higher than his. That's when I got blocked. And I said, meet me. I'm in Vegas all the time. I was going to go do ADCC there, and if you want to meet me in the front yard and scrap and throw hands up.
I'll be the first person to tell you, I've been lucky enough to train with what I would call like real fighters in my day, and every single one of them had this in common, and that was always chasing the highest possible threat they could. They wanted the biggest fights they could get, not necessarily looking for wins. They were looking for challenges because they wanted to rise to the occasion. Like a Sean Woodson. I've never seen Sean Woodson say no to a single fight. Evan Elder, same thing. It's like both of those guys are cut from the same cloth. And then lo and behold, look, they're in the UFC. It's no surprise to me. You know what I mean? When I look at a guy like this, the actions, the words are not conducive to the lifestyle that would be needed to attain the goals he's looking for. And I will end this portion of this conversation just by saying, if the goal is to get to the highest level, you're 30 years old, you're 4-3, and
I think he's 7-4.
whatever. Almost like, I guess what I'm trying to say is, I've seen the guy fight. Good luck to you, man. Good luck to you.
Yeah.
You were briefly discussing how like you've been kind of removed from MMA and that you've been doing a whole lot of grappling. And that earlier that you said you and Josh Augustine were both training at St. Charles MMA. But were you always, like when you started training jiu-jitsu and martial arts in general, were you always under Mike Rogers? Was he like your first and only coach, or was it Rodrigo Vaghi first?
I trained there. I trained at Rodrigo's for like one summer and only a few months, and then I went to college at Lindenwood and I started training with Mike. So I'd say 95%
of the time was with Mike.
Yeah, I mean, I bet you probably went to less than 10 classes originally with Rodrigo, and then I've cross-trained back and forth throughout like all the gyms.
Now, you've also, because I remember when I was training at St. Charles in May, you were doing like a whole lot of boxing and kickboxing. So obviously, jiu-jitsu was, when you first started training, it may have been jiu-jitsu, but then you also went into the foray of other martial arts, became a mixed martial artist. Yeah. But now it seems like you're kind of going back to those roots of like those grappling roots. Can you just walk me through why, and is it like is jiu-jitsu the martial art you love over the others? Like why aren't you doing boxing? Why aren't you doing kickboxing or Muay Thai? Why are you doing jiu-jitsu instead?
Well, I mean, running a jiu-jitsu gym is probably the easiest. It's probably the most profitable. Boxing gyms, can we name any super successful ones in St. Louis?
The Money Team. Oh, in St. Louis area. My bad.
So running a jiu-jitsu team is probably the most marketable and easy to run. Like, I like boxing. I've considered just like doing it for fun, just to stay in shape. I worked out a lot with Mike Wood, and I keep meaning, maybe just laziness, but I'd still do Muay Thai too, if I just had the time to do it. I still love Muay Thai. Like, I love watching Muay Thai fights, and I shadow box in the corner every now and then, just, throwing Thai kicks. But I do probably enjoy jiu-jitsu the most.
And is that why you opened? You're saying that like a jiu-jitsu gym is like the most lucrative and the easiest to run. So it's not necessarily you love all these martial arts. It's not that you particularly chose jiu-jitsu, but jiu-jitsu seems to be the most pragmatic.
Yeah, I think it's probably the most popular right now of upcoming with kids. How many kid boxers do you know?
No, I would agree with you personally.
I mean, I tell kids not to like box and get punched in the head, but
I would make the same. If I am a father, but like let's say I had not that my daughter couldn't do this, but the comments have been made for my daughter, like all my family members, like when are you gonna get her into jiu-jitsu? Mm-hmm. When are you gonna get into boxing, into kickboxing, and do all these other things? I'm like, I probably won't ever get her into boxing, and I don't mean to sound sexist when I say this, because I think if the goal is to be able to defend yourself as a woman, then jiu-jitsu is the creme de la creme, because it overcomes a lot of physical adversities that you will have as a woman. And I'm not saying that women boxers can't beat up. Like if you took Clarissa Shields, I'm sure she could beat up the majority of like men off the street. Right?
I mean, unless we're talking about the one that's in the Olympics now, I think that one's doing pretty well.
That one's actually. Correct me if I'm wrong, Matt, and I'm sorry to ask, but can you look this up? She's a woman.
I've heard a lot of conflicting things.
That's the thing. I've seen, at first it was like, that's a man.
Right.
And then in the past couple of days, there's photo evidence that woman is actually a woman.
Right. So yeah, I'm really against like some of it, and I shared it on Facebook, and people made a few comments like intersex. I was like, what are we? And the situation seems to be more complex than this is
previously stated.
A biological male that's fighting females. I don't know. I wasn't going to say anything else till like the facts came out, because which if it's an intersex person, that's a complicated. I don't know what's fair, and I'm not educated enough on all that stuff to be like, what's fair, what's not. As long as it's fair game.
Well, here's the thing: if it was intersex and all that,
I
my
don't
whole
know,
thing
no.
is transparency, right?
Yeah.
My whole thing is if you're chasing like an equal level playing field, if the more transparent you can be, then the easier that is to attain. Like let's say we want to fight, and like you come to me and I come to you and I say, "What's your record?" And you're like, "Well, I don't want to tell you," and I'm like, "Well, I need to know your record if I'm going to accept this." Because like, what if you're 10-0 and I'm only 0-0, right? So then you tell me your record. I go, "Okay." What weight class are we fighting at? And you're like, well, I don't want to tell you. It's like the more transparent we can be with information, the closer we can come to like an equal competitive battleground, so to speak.
Yeah.
At the Olympics, I feel like that's the place where you could be like, hey, test everybody. What's your T levels? What's your testosterone, epitestosterone? What's your estrogen levels? Like this should be something that like all Olympic athletes have to go through just to make sure, not necessarily if you're like a woman or a man, like right off the get go, but to like just make sure like we're operating under the purview of equal.
Which you would think the Olympic Committee has already done all these testing, right?
I would hope.
I don't know.
I've been reading articles about the Paris Olympics, like horror stories. Have you heard about the triathletes who had to swim in the river in Paris? They had to get delayed because there was so much fecal matter in the river
Jeez.
that it was unsafe to swim in. And then like after 3 days, which I don't even know what you do in a river to like clean up the shit. Like do you like is that like their sewer line? Like how are you going to get that any better, right? So like here in St. Louis, we have River de Pear. That's literally where all of our shit goes. I'm not being hyperbolic in that, you know what I mean? But like we also don't swim in River de Pear. You know what I mean? So it's like if you have shit in your river, is that where the sewers are going? Like I'm confused with this. How much shit has to be in that river for it to be unsafe for people to swim in? Long story short, after 3 days, the committee said like, hey, we ran tests, like we can, you know what I mean? We can safely swim in this river. And the woman who ended up getting gold, like blasted the Olympic Committee. She's like, the shit that I saw when I was swimming. Like she was like literally like hitting shit as she's paddling. She's like, this is disgusting. Which incidentally, we would have to look at like the times. Could you imagine like how much faster they're swimming because they want to get the hell out of that water?
That would be fun.
They're just like they hit new world records for the swimming portion of the triathlon. All I'm saying is it seems to be technology is working like as a double-edged sword. It used to be that like, you know, news, like breaking news that was provided to you quickly was like quote unquote reliable. Now that is not the case. I know from like anecdotal evidence, I wait 2 days. I don't make a comment on anything big until after 48 hours. The Olympics, that boxer girl, all my friends were like losing their shit. Yeah. And they were asking me, they're like, what do you think, Ariane? What do you think? And I responded to all of them. I was like, if the information presented is accurate, then this is what I think. However, let's wait a couple days. And then lo and behold, evidence comes out that she was a girl when she was little, and here's the pictures and all these other things. Yeah. I mean, what are we going to ask her to do? Like, show us your pussy? Like, what are we doing here? You know what I mean? Simultaneously, if I'm competing, I want to make sure that, like, at some point, some test was done to make sure that you're, like, a biological woman and competing on an equal playing field. But to bring that back about information is, like, now after 2-3 days, look how much the narrative has changed. Now everyone's like, well, if you were rushing to that, you were, like, a conservative conspiracy theorist. And it's like, can you blame the liberals for thinking that way? I wouldn't. It's a weird time to be alive when it comes to information now, because if you're first of all, being first is incredibly difficult, right? Because Twitter is like the main news outlet now. Yeah. So like anybody can get on Twitter and quote unquote share news. Right. But then to be reliable now is like secondary. First is first. Reliability is second. And when you have that paradigm, people will be sharing shit that's, and I hate to say the word because I think it's like, you know, in a lot of ways liberals have like bastardized the English language, but it's a misinformation. Yeah. You're presenting information in an inaccurate way.
I wonder, like, at one point in time with journalism, like, if you put out a bad story with bad information, like, that was really bad. Like, but it almost became acceptable. Like, oh, it was just a mistake. But
well, they could go back and do edits. Like, because that does happen sometimes. Like, honest journalists will make a story. Perhaps they're rushing to get it first, and then they do things incorrectly. So then they'll draft and edit, and they'll post it on the newspaper and say, hey, last week's edition had this. This is this week's edition with the updated information. And they would have some journalistic integrity. I would make the argument that what we have now is incompetence and ignorance, where before, if there was misinformation, I would usually tend to believe it was more propaganda and more organized, because you have editors, you have like a chain of command. You're not just like throwing an article together and throwing it on the newspaper or on the website. You have to get approvals, and someone has to read your work and approve of that work. So if there is misinformation being done by a main media outlet or a newspaper or what have you, I tend to think that that's by design. Whereas on Twitter, I think a lot of it is just incompetence and like echo chamber thinking and people wanting something to be true. Because believe me, all my conservative friends for the first 48 hours were blasting that shit. And then when some evidence came out that woman that we thought was a man is actually a woman, crickets. And then the liberals were like ham bassing. I'm like, look at you guys are wrong, ha ha ha. And I'm just like, dude, how about we just cool down and let's find out what's reality.
Yeah, when I started seeing conflicting information, I was just like, yeah, we'll just wait and see how this.
We're gonna pause on that one.
Plays out.
What do you think of that opening ceremony, though? First, did you watch it live or did you watch it after?
I watched a little bit. The how they had the Last Supper thing. It's supposed to be something for Dionysus, and I don't know. I didn't really see the Last Supper in it.
I don't even care about like its resemblance to religion, to be completely honest with you. Like, if you have a platform and you want to blast whatever it is that you want to blast, like I believe in capitalism and the market, and if people like that kind of shit, they'll view it, and if people don't, they won't. My whole thing is, why is this on the Olympics? Like, what does this have anything to do with nations of the world coming together to compete? That's my whole thing.
Was it like the Dionysus and the like? And going back to Greek history, isn't that what they were saying? That it was?
If that's a stretch, is what I would say to that. What I'm saying is, there's a guy with his balls hanging out on international television, and you're telling me this is like a reference to like ancient Greek. By that logic, just have them all be naked, because that's how they wrestled back in the day. Rub them in oil and have them be naked. If we're trying to be historically accurate, whatever the bullshit is, it's an excuse. It is propaganda. It is to like send a message, and that's fine. My whole thing is, what does this have to do with sport? I'll give you a prime example. Let's say I go to Pornhub, and the first thing I see is a giant black cock. Could I be angry? Oh my God, there's a big black cock on my screen. No, I went to Pornhub. Okay? Yeah. But if I go to Chuck E. Cheese and I see some guy doing the helicopter, do I not have the right to be upset with this? Yes, because that's not the environment that I was expecting this kind of thing. That's kind of how I say about like the Olympics. I wasn't going to Pornhub. I was expecting to see like athletes and this, that, or the other. Instead, I'm watching some blue guy dance and some guy with half his junk out. And I'm thinking to myself, what the fuck am I watching right now? What does this have anything to do with sports or the Olympics?
Think of the level of which seemed maybe is propaganda, the levels of why. Like, that's some deep-rooted, like, propaganda to do this on the international TV to convey what message, or the make, like, what are you trying to do with it?
I've been thinking that for a long time, for the last 4 years, because I go down rabbit holes myself, Kirk. You know what I mean? I think to myself, like, okay, well, you have, Alex Jones conservatives, and then you have Kamala Harris liberals. Do with that information whatever you want. But what I think to myself is, like, what is the end goal with this? Because I do think that polarization is profitable. Like, I can get on Twitter, and if I get on at noon or if at 5, I'm getting completely different stories, like, liberals blasting conservatives, conservatives blasting liberals, and it's all profitability. It's like, it's catchy titles on newspaper articles like, this person did this, read more. Or it's like a YouTube video with the thumbnail is like Trump with an angry face or Kamala cackling. It's just like, it's pulling at the worst in us to polarize us even more and force us into echo chambers for the purpose of profitability, because anger is almost as infectious as like sex when it comes to marketing. You might watch things that you love, but I guarantee the fervency in things that you hate, you'll watch even more because you want to hate it. Now, I'm not saying you particularly, but human nature is. It's like, oh, this gets me angry. This gets me riled up. And if it's just being blasted in front of your face, especially with the way algorithms work, you'll click on one video, and then you'll get 5 more videos like that.
Yeah. Anger's a very underestimated emotion.
When it comes to profitability and marketing, I think you're right.
Even in my last argument with Josh, it's just like, he says some, like, it's like I couldn't even stop. Just like, I'm gonna keep going. Like, everyone's like, oh, I'm 35 years old. I shouldn't be getting in Facebook arguments. But like, he insulted my dead dad. So like, why? Like, I'm gonna keep going with this. So I get it.
It's not easy taking the higher ground. I also didn't know that he said that about your father.
Oh yeah.
Makes me feel even like less bad about saying bad things about him. I often say that I don't want to use this podcast to like say, like hurl accusations or like say bad things. But Josh, if you haven't taken steroids and you're not a piece of shit, feel free to hop on the pod. You can you can lie to my face. To bring it back full circle, because I don't want to harp on negative stuff too much. I think Twitter, social media, I think a lot of these things are not in a trajectory that it's like healthy for a civilization or a culture or people. But I also think that people are the ones driving it. So it's like, who's to get in there and intervene in that? I think it's going to take people to have to kind of come to that conclusion themselves.
Well, that's like your flirting line then with what, censorship?
Yes.
That's dangerous too.
I agree, because then, I mean, I always trust people to do what's in their best interest, even if it's self-destructive, because who am I to get into someone else's life and change the way they like, I don't think it's our position to save people from themselves. Does that make sense? Like, if you do heroin and you're on the street, you can make the argument it's like my moral obligation. Like, I should want to stop you, but like, do I have the right to stop you from doing whatever you want to your own body? The liberal would say no, right? The conservative would also say no if it was their wallet. But I don't think we have the obligation to save people from themselves. If they want to implode, that's their right. And if they want to succeed, that's also their right.
Yeah, I don't think you can stop it.
I don't think you can. I mean, you can, but I don't know if that's right.
That's a complex question.
Yeah. Anyway, Jiu-jitsu, the gym.
Yeah.
What's it like owning your own gym? Arnold BJJ, you've been there now, what, 6 years? 7?
7, yeah.
7 years?
That's good. We got a new building. Got a lot of competitors. I travel most weekends, so that's fun.
Is it what you thought it would be, owning a gym?
More or less. I mean, you there's a lot more of like dealing with personal relationships with people than you think. Like, a lot of people come to me with like life issues, like I should know things about kids or like help you. I'm like, I can show you this armbar.
Kirk, my wife's cheating on me. Damn, have you thought about getting this triangle perfected?
Yeah, I've heard all that. Like, those exact situations. I'm just like, yeah, I think it's like the old guru. People think like I'm an old like guru and no life skills. I'm just like, man, like, you're asking the wrong dude. I'm arguing with some dude on Facebook right now.
Kirk's like, 1 second. Fuck you.
Yeah, fuck you.
What was that? What do you need help with?
About your 401k. Hold on, I'm arguing with this 30-year-old dude with pink hair. Hold on.
Incidentally, that sounds like a lot of people I know.
Yeah. Yeah, don't ask my life.
I think it comes with the territory, right? Because they look at you as like this not father figure, but influential person that you're teaching them this other skill. So why wouldn't you be knowledgeable about other things? Do you have to like step back and be like, hey, listen, like, or do you just, are you their therapist? Are you their coach, their friend, their business partner, their everything? You wear many hats.
Yeah, I mean, some people you get closer to, just like human nature. Like, some people are more friends with, and some people are just like your students, and like, if you're friends with someone and they have a problem, you try to hear them out. But, you try not to, like, be the guru that's on call 24/7 for everyone's life problems.
Do you ever get kind of, sometimes I get anxiety when people ask me for advice because I desperately don't want my advice to, like, backfire. So I always kind of say, like, hey, I'm not telling you what to do. but this is like some of the things that I've done and I've had success with. Because I feel that personal anxiety where they're like, Ariane, what should I do? I'm like, hey, I don't want to tell you to do something, but then you eat shit and now you're looking at me like I did this to you.
I mean, not in like people don't ask like life advice sometimes, like maybe just like competition wise what they should do, and so I'm just like, well,
Kirk, I was in this dark room and this ghost touched me. What should I do?
no, that's not right.
Kirk's like, did you record it? What's the because you're still competing in jiu-jitsu, what's the goal with that? Are you trying to become like a world's champion? Like,
I've set up a few goals. Like this year I was trying to win 5 IBJJF Open and I did it, so that's cool. And then I wanted the medal at an ADCC, which I failed short on that one. I think I have the ability to medal this year in one of the bigger tournaments. I don't think I can win worlds, honestly. There's a few guys, like right now, I'm ranked, I think, 15. And there's a few guys that, like, I would need luck, baseball bat, a few other things to beat. They're just straight better than me. But I think a real goal, I mean, I'm not saying I can't do it in the next few years. Probably not this year, but I want to medal at a major tournament like Pans or American Nationals, and Nogi is getting more popular, and I've struggled more in Nogi. I've had way more success in the gi, so
why do you think that is?
That's a great question. I keep trying. I think a lot of my finishing mechanics in Nogi is not as well. I think the majority of my training is in gi, so I only normally train Nogi like once, twice a week. So sure that's a factor.
A famous black belt once said that training in the gi is like training in no gi, but in the gi. Eddie Bravo.
They're different. Everyone's like, what's harder, more complex? They're just different. You know, it's like they're equally as hard. They're just, and Nogi is getting more popular with ADCC.
Do you think one is, this is going to be like a weird question because you just said like do you think Nogi is growing at a faster rate than gi, even though Nogi doesn't have the belting system because of the competitive aspect to it?
I mean, Nogi still has a belt, so
What?
IBJJF
Since
tournaments
when?
still go through the ranks of blue belt.
You can do no-gi and still get belt?
Yeah.
Since when? Fuck, I've been doing jiu-jitsu for like 10 years. I'm still a white belt.
So, like, say you go to 10th Planet.
Yeah.
And you can sign up for the tournaments, and you can still get signed off as a blue belt, purple belt, and just compete no-gi. Like, as far as I know, I think, like, Pixley only does, like, no-gi, and he's competing in the IBJJF at some certain belt.
Okay, forgive me. Let's take a step back. One of the things that attracted me to jiu-jitsu was that the belts actually meant something, at least when I was starting, right? I was like, because I had so many friends who were like black belts in karate or taekwondo or bullshit when they were like 13 years old. I'm a second-degree black belt and they're 15. I'm like, okay, dude, settle down, right? But then you go to jiu-jitsu and it's like, no, a black belt in jiu-jitsu, like this guy is cold. Like he'll leave with your limbs. I don't know if I necessarily like this aspect of like just training in no-gi gets you a belt that transitions to the gi, then vice. Because like if you're a black belt in the gi, you're a black belt without it on, right? Yeah. And I guess you could make the argument that like if you've trained jiu-jitsu for 10 years, you would have been a purple belt in the gi, so why wouldn't you be in the no-gi? But the whole belting system works around someone promoting you. It's not necessarily based on like experience, right? It's like someone with that belt has to see that skill set in you. Do you think that belting no gi is a good thing? Do you think it dilutes the sport?
Well, really, it's kind of just a pyramid scheme with the IBJJF. Like, so I did all my paperwork for them, and you have to pay them. I think I paid them $1,000. Then I can sign off. Say you come to my gym, I can say, Ariane, I sign off on you, and you're a blue belt. Then you wait a certain amount of time. Then I can sign off on you as a purple belt, as long as I pay my money to the IBJJF. So the belt system is financially motivated.
I was under the assumption that if like you could only get a black belt if it was awarded to you. By the way, not just black belt, brown, purple, blue, whatever belt color you are. It has to be given to you by an equivalent or higher belt. Like so, if I'm a blue belt, I can give you a blue belt, but I can't give you a purple belt because I'm not a purple belt, right? And the belting system was basically like awarded, and the legitimacy of that belt was based on who gave it to you. That's why the whole like whether you're Gracie or whether you're 10th plan or whatever, this has merit was because who did you get your belt under? And the more prolific the person, the more regarded the person, the more impressive that belt, right? Like if you tell me I got my black belt from Joe Schmo that no one's ever heard of, no one's gonna be impressed. But you say I got my black belt from, I don't know, pick. Let's say Rodrigo.
Yeah.
That carries a little bit more weight. Or Mike Rogers, that carries a little bit more weight. Why? Because they have gyms, they have fighters, they have a whole curriculum behind it. You're telling me that you pay $1,000 a year, I'm guessing, to get like some sort of license from IBJJF?
So like I had to get belted from an IBJJF black belt. Then
why?
Well, that's just like you can get a belt from anybody. It means like, say the guy's not IBJJF certified. Like some people are going through a struggle now, and they're black belt under whoever. Like I'm not sure if Hickson Gracie's under IBJJF, and like you could be a Hickson Gracie black belt and that's on. I don't know if he is or not, but it's who you compete for. So like if you're doing the IBJJF, which for most people is like the gold standard of competing with the worlds in the gi, like that black belt has to be IBJJF certified. He had to get his belt from an IBJJF certified black belt. So they're saying they're holding
like a pyramid scheme.
They're holding the standards this way, and it's very much financially motivated. So say you wanted to be like get promoted by someone that wasn't certified and you became a black belt, you could not have your students compete in the IBJJF because you're not an IBJJF certified black belt. They'd have to go elsewhere to get their paperwork signed off to compete in their tournaments.
While I can understand the theory behind this would be to keep like a certain level of accreditation to the belts, it seems like there's a gatekeeper for this. And that gatekeeper is IBJJF or you said ADCC.
Well, ADCC doesn't matter. You could go in and compete. ADCC breaks it down by beginner, intermediate, and advanced divisions, and they're opens at least. Or the trials, you could be a white belt. It don't matter. You can compete. You don't have to have anybody sign off on your paperwork. You're good to go. It's free.
And why is that not like the premier one? Like why is IBJJF?
They've been around the longest.
So it's tenure.
Yeah, they've been around the longest. They've run the worlds that most people hold as like the true world championship. Then you have all the other smaller tournaments, which you don't have to. You could walk into like a local Fuji tournament wearing a black belt and say I'm a black belt, and you're good to go.
They'll let you in.
Yeah,
but that's, in my opinion, just throwing this out there, like that's the proper way to do it because then through competition you'll learn real quick. Yeah. Jiu-jitsu is one of the rare instances where, like, if you do kickboxing, a lot of it is like point fighting. You know what I mean? Same thing with Taekwondo. Jiu-jitsu is like, hey, we're gonna roll, and we have a point system in Jiu-jitsu as well. But like, we also have the great equalizer of if I tap you, you can be up however many freaking points. It doesn't matter. If I tap you, I win. So it's like you can be quote unquote black belt, and maybe you gave it to yourself. You'll know within the first 30 seconds if this is legit or not. So like, why are we hamstringing people?
Right.
I would even go as far as to say, if someone does that, you know how like there's like Tapology for MMA and like there's like the boxing commissions that handle the records. I would say that these tournaments, instead of charging people $1,000 to be quote unquote accredited, just keep track of these guys and their records.
What is the chess ranking? How do you name that ranking system?
Grandmaster?
No, how they rank people. EOJ.
The rating? You're talking about like the number associated with chess?
Yeah.
What is it, Matt? Sorry?
ELO?
Yeah, your ELO. There could be an ELO ranking. So say, I forget what belt you're, blue or purple belt?
Dude, I'm white.
Oh, you're white belt? Say we go do a tournament and you beat me.
Kirk,
like you
I very rarely ever put the gi on.
Yeah.
Yet I've been doing jiu-jitsu for the last 12 years of my life. I wrestled before then. When I go on the mats, I do very well for myself. Yeah. But like, what's my belt ranking? White. Now, why don't I compete at white belt? Because that's not fair. I'm not going to sandbag. I'm not going to do that. Yeah. But I don't want to say that I'm a purple belt because I'm not. No one's ever awarded me my purple belt, right? Maybe I'm less. Maybe I'm a blue belt. Maybe I don't know that. But like, that's why I don't necessarily compete in jiu-jitsu, because I've thought about it. Like, okay, I might be done MMA, but like, I'm going to go and maybe do jiu-jitsu and compete in jiu-jitsu. But if I compete in jiu-jitsu right now, I'm an asshole. But that's not cool. I've been training 11 years. I'm a white belt. Come on, that's not fair. So then what? I have to do jiu-jitsu for like how long until
I think technically you'd have to start at blue because at least the IBJJF, if you had pro MMA fights or amateur MMA
You're
fights,
considered a blue belt minimum.
Yeah.
Well, I'm fine with the threshold and like these rule systems. I'm just not necessarily fine with having some organization lord over you. Like I wouldn't want this for any aspect of life. Does that make sense?
Yeah. I mean, yeah, it's just the way.
Why doesn't the UFC do that? Like, oh, you had a non-UFC affiliated MMA fight. You're 4-0, let's say, but none of the promotions were UFC affiliated, so it's not real or it's not considered like prestigious or legitimate.
An ELO ranking in tournaments would do it.
But then, while I agree, is that in tandem? Like, is that in conjunction with the belts? Meaning, like, my ELO, let's say, like in chess, there's no cap, right? Like, you can, as long as you keep winning, you can, the sky's the limit, so to speak. So, like, do you reset on every belt? So, like, a white belt is like 1500 ELO, and then he goes to blue belt. Obviously, he's not a 1500 blue belt. So, like, so does he go back to zero?
Say open it up, let everyone go. Like, say,
or do you just have an ELO, and then the belts are kind of like, I'm a black belt, but my ELO is 1800 globally, or what have you?
Which, to be fair, like, if you start beating black belts, you're probably like a black belt. If you're beating these guys that are ranked high, like, have you seen the new Craig Jones tournament coming out?
No.
It'll be interesting. So he got into it with ADCC, and he's doing a tournament same weekend.
I know who Craig Jones is, but I didn't know he was.
So it's they're doing a mat, but slanted sides. So if you back up and get pushed in to the wall,
you can keep rolling.
You essentially get taken down. You're on your back against the wall. They don't stop it. And it's 3 5-minute rounds, same as like MMA, I think. But it's rounds, and it's like a 10-9 system. And he's
for jiu-jitsu?
Yeah. And he's brought in a bunch of wrestlers for the event, which I think might do well.
Yeah, especially considering the point and the
like
criteria.
Jason Dahl's doing it, a few other.
I don't know if I like everything you said about this style. I personally, have you ever seen that karate kickboxing? What's the
Karate Combat?
Karate Combat.
That's what he's using. He's using that.
That same, like, I think that form of like competitive environment is actually genius. Because one of the things I personally hate about MMA is this 90-degree angle against the cage that gives you like this artificial. I'll give you a prime example of why I'm saying this. Bilal Muhammad can take down Leon Edwards like 9 times, 10 times against the cage because he's pressuring him and pushing him in. But then on an open mat, he gets stuffed because his takedown is actually dog shit. He's like bending his back and he's just like rushing himself in. But if you have something where like it's slanted and not a 90-degree angle, it changes the fundamental game for a lot of these takedowns. And I would love to see an MMA promotion do something like that. It doesn't have to be like 45 degrees. Make it 60, whatever. But do some sort of slant so that like people can lean and you can kind of sweep them underneath, change the game somewhat. And then you also actually have it better for the viewership because there's no cage and post in your way. The people are elevated looking down, and it'll just make it easier as you get to a stadium seating because that's already the logical aptitude for the vision. Forgive me, though, I interrupted because I was talking about the Karate Combat arena, and you were saying that this gentleman, Craig Jones, is also going to do something very similar to this, but he's going to do 3 5-minute rounds. I just don't agree with that. Do you like this system for jiu-jitsu? Because I don't think 5 minutes. You were a part of Adam Sella's jiu-jitsu show not too long ago.
Yeah.
I loved everything about that show, but the time limit. I don't think 5-6 minutes is enough for some of these matches. Like, give the guy some time for the athleticism to also be a factor. It's like you can have a skill set, you could be completely out of shape, and you could survive for 5 minutes. Yeah, you lost because based on points, but you didn't get tapped, and that's kind of like the thing, right?
Yeah,
give them time, especially like.
Yeah, I lost with no points scored on me. It's like so sometimes you watch 10-minute matches and the pace is so slow, nothing gets done. And people don't open up. They stall for a long time. And sometimes with 5-minute matches, you see more submissions because people get down and they open up. It's just such a hard sport to try to come up with the perfect rule set for.
I do agree, but then I would also say then you can increase the time limit and then also create rule sets that kind of force that. Like, I think Eddie Bravo had a pretty good system in place when he did the EBI.
The overtime?
Yeah.
I hate the overtime.
Why?
All right, so this happened.
First of all, can you explain for people that might not know when you say the overtime, what are you referring to?
So at the end of the match, there's no points. You can either start in spider web armbar or back. And it goes by quickest escape time or submission. So say I literally lost a match 2 weekends ago. Like I passed the guy's guard, mounted him, had his back the whole match. And then in overtime, he hit a quicker escape for me. So I dominated the match, every aspect of jiu-jitsu, until overtime. And he rolled out faster than me in 5 seconds.
But let me ask you a question. Was that submission only?
Yeah.
Well, then what does it matter? Because didn't you sign up for a certain rule set?
Yeah. But we're declaring him the winner, and who displayed the more effective jiu-jitsu.
You're declaring him the winner of that competitive outing
Yeah.
based on the rule sets agreed to by both men. I understand what you're trying to say.
Yeah.
Like, I get it. Because you're like, dude, I beat your ass for 5 minutes, and then you beat me, quote unquote, because you escaped faster than me. So, like, in terms of who's, like, the better jiu-jitsu practitioner,
Yeah.
it's you. But who won that competition? It's him, because based on the rules, he played the game better. Like, if you play basketball, do you bitch that you have to dribble? No, because so does everybody else. Like, that's the rules we're all playing by. Does that make sense?
It's not like I'm not like super mad about that particular.
I'm not saying that.
No, it's like I think the overall rule set should indicate who displays the more effective grappling at the end of the day, and like say, which can't bitch should have submitted the guy, but say you start on my back, but you were never close to that position, and the rule set allowed it. I get it, it's just another aspect of the game. I tell even people that I coach, I'm like, in those EBI rule sets, if you go to overtime, it's like an asterisk, win or lose. Like, it just, something about like someone dominating a match and then letting them start on your back because the overtime was, that just doesn't seem right.
Doesn't seem right, yeah.
I actually, the Adam Meredith, the rule set he uses, I came up with.
What rule set is this?
So I always try to use 3 judges. All right.
For each match.
Yeah. So match starts, and say there's a definitive submission attempt, and it's close. Like he has to use some defensive techniques to get out of it, and is in danger. Head referee raises his hand, indicating this, and both outside officials have to agree. They raise their hand, 1 point's awarded. And and if there's a stalling call, the referee has to do the same thing. Raises his hand, this is stalling, both people agree.
What if 2 of the judges say yes, but one says no? So like let's say
no dice.
The head official says, hey, that's a point. One guy says, yes, I agree. The other guy says, no, I don't. It has to be unanimous.
Unanimous. Which I hope he watches this. Last time we did this rule set, Neil Lewis, you messed it up because I declared a point, and who was it? Jordan Dowdy raised his hand. I looked over at Neil, and he's like this. I was like, dude, what are you doing?
You had one fucking
one job, man.
We gotta make a clip out of that one. I like Neil. He's a good guy. He's the first person to ever teach me turtle guard.
No, he still does it. Yeah.
He's like a black belt now, isn't he?
Yeah.
There's so many guys that I trained with when I was at St. Charles MMA that continue to do gi jiu-jitsu, and I've seen them now flourish as black belts, and it's pretty awesome to watch. We know a lot of black belts in St. Louis now that I think about it. It makes sense. You know, it's a sport where the more time you accumulate into it, you're going to naturally progress. So eventually, as long as you maintain, you'll eventually get to that level. It seems like there seems to be a schism between competition jiu-jitsu and the sport of jiu-jitsu. Actually, sorry, competition and the sport of jiu-jitsu and the martial art of jiu-jitsu.
Yeah.
And what I mean by that is, you know, we were talking about jiu-jitsu, but we're talking about points, rule sets, gi, no gi, when the actual martial art in its inception was essentially a variation of Chinese jiu-jitsu. For the small man to defend themselves through martial art against the bigger, stronger opponent.
Yeah.
Do you think that the homogenization and the sportification of jiu-jitsu is a good thing for the martial art or a net negative? Because I think there's pros and cons to both. Because it grows the sport, right? Yeah. So more people get inundated to jiu-jitsu who may have never noticed it, but it's also kind of straying from the original path.
Yeah. Yeah, there's pros and cons. You can't deny that, people come out with things that may not work great in self-defense, like
Yeah.
inversions and playing different guards, but like it is a sport. Like if you want to compete and play the rules and the system, you're gonna have to learn some of these intricate guards and how to deal with advantage, which in a street fight probably get stomped out.
Can I tell you something I've thought about? You can
Uh-huh.
tell me if I'm crazy or not. Every jiu-jitsu tournament should be done on concrete.
That changed things.
It would change things. You'd see a lot less guard pulling and a lot less what I call dumb shit. And I don't mean dumb shit as like stuff that doesn't work. I'm saying stuff that you would not do in a real altercation, but you're doing because of the rules set in the sport.
Yeah.
That being said, I've also literally competed in one jiu-jitsu tournament my whole life. So I have a biased viewpoint in this.
I mean, it's fun. Like the self-defense aspect is cool. Like if it's like I have students that they have no interest in competing. It's like, how do I promote them according to somebody that's trying to win worlds? It's like you kind of have to treat those people differently.
Does promotion have anything to do with competition?
No, actually, probably you were around. Is like a lot of times people try to surprise people with belts. Like, oh, and I surprise you with a belt. My competitors, I pretty much leave it up to them. So there's like guys that are moving up to blue belt even next weekend, or people have goals like I want to win pans. I'm like, well, do you want to stay at this belt? You probably have a better chance of winning it, or if you move up, it's going to be harder. And if you win pans and worlds and all these medals, I'm like, you're probably the next belt.
Yeah, if you win pans at white belt.
My general rule of thumb is like if you're winning 60 to 70% of your matches, it's probably about that time to move up.
You think?
Like if you're
so just a slight majority. Because 60%, I mean, you're still losing 40, right?
Well, I'm saying that I should reframe that at the higher level tournaments like the IBJJF Opens, Worlds, Pans. If you're dominating and you like, no one's really if you win 15, 20 straight, and I'm like,
it's time for a promo.
It's time to move up. Which winning's fun, everyone loves, but like, I've had some of my best wins is like someone that's like did me dirty and beat me and then come back like a year later and win them. That feels good.
Yeah, because it's a sense of progression in yourself.
Yeah. But some people have no interest in competing. It's like you still want to promote. Like you got that 40-year-old guy. He still wants to be a black belt.
Do you think that promotion sometimes gets in the way of jiu-jitsu in the sense that like some guys might go into the gym and they want to learn jiu-jitsu, and then once they start getting inundated with jiu-jitsu, they might get their first stripe on their white belt, and they're like, ooh, then this like the euphoric feeling of like a physical representation of the progression that I've made, and then it's like this weird shift. It's like what got you into the gym is no longer what's keeping you in the gym. It's like now you're more focused on getting another stripe. When do I get my blue belt? And then I think they say like some of the worst things that can happen to a jiu-jitsu guy is getting their blue belt, because like, there's so many people that get their blue belt and then they never come back.
Yeah. I always try to like set up goals, and it's just like, okay, like there's 4 stripes. Let's plan out some goals to be serious. Okay, you want to win you want to do a tournament, you want to win a match. I want to win the tournament. And I've had even older people like, I would like to go to a whole class where we roll and not take a break. Like, all right, you get there, and that sounds like a good first goal.
You mean an off round?
Yeah, like I want to do 7 5
straight.
And like, right now they're barely getting through one. Like that's a good goal. Like we get there, that's good for a stripe.
What if they're not competing though? Jiu-jitsu is a weird sport for me because there's a lot of things that I like about it, but there's a lot of things that make me like scratch my head, right? One of them is it's the one sport where, or not sport, I shouldn't say sport, martial art, where like you can get belted for like enough time, right?
Yeah.
Like you can have guys in their 60s get black belts. So like how do you belt a 60-year-old where obviously their physical aptitude is much less that of a 30-year-old, but they've been doing it for 20 years now? Like what's the metric in which you do that? So like let's say I'm 55 and you're like, well, a good goal is to like get through a whole practice. Well, like, dude, I just can't.
Right.
You know what I mean?
You find obtainable goals.
Yeah.
And some of it, I mean, even this may sound is like giving back to the team. Say you've been there for that long and you kind of take the newest guy on your wing and you're helping them, like you're giving back to the community. I mean, and if you're older, like I want everyone to get their black belt if like they're sticking around and they want to do it longer. Like I'd imagine everyone, no one wants to be like, I just want to get like the purple belt. And, I'm good with that. I think everyone wants to be a black belt.
How does it feel when you got like a guy who you've kind of like invested a lot of time into, and they maybe shy away from jujitsu, maybe stop training, maybe like they get the blue belt, right? So like it's like a white belt, gets his fourth stripe, you promote him blue belt, and then crickets, like you don't see him again. How does that feel?
It's always different. It's like some people you invest a lot of time in, life happens, but it does suck. I mean, like, and you have people that opt to join another team for whatever reason. People leave. That's just a part of the sport. And some situations are harder than others. Some people you like you don't see their point of view, and some you do. So every situation is different when it comes to that.
Am I correct in? I want to be careful how I say this. Am I correct in thinking that cross training in jujitsu is frowned upon?
I think it's less frowned upon now than ever. Like when I started, like you didn't, and that was not a thing. But like I, I tell people do it as much as you can, like because I teach everything in systems. Like we will go over a move, then like I only teach one or two moves a night. It's a variation. But say I'm rolling with you and we're going over this, you know exactly what I'm doing. But you take it down the street to another gym, they don't know, and you can get real feedback of the situation and like you can you if you treat it like the scientific method here, like okay, this is my theory. I'm gonna form this hypothesis. Failed. I need to come back maybe to this our gym, figure out a new way. But if your sample size is so small of the variables, like you're not getting the most out of your training.
Would you say that as a coach as well? Meaning, like, don't just only coach the guys in your gym. Like, I'm sure you still go to St. Charles and May a couple times. You coach classes down there as well.
Yeah, I still teach there in the
So,
mornings.
and I'm sure there's a lot of homogenization. It's like a Venn diagram, right? It's like the St. Charles guys, the Vaggie guys,
Yeah.
Arnold BJJ, Jason Powell has his own gym. But I'm sure you guys kind of like all kind of flip flop, train with one another, what have you. It might be different rooms, but you all kind of trained under the same people.
We all the teachers probably have different like the guys that train up in St. Charles. I can even watch them roll. I can tell their styles differently than how I teach. Like
Really?
yeah, a lot more smash passing and like
Do you think it comes from the instructors? Because like
yeah,
Mike's a bigger guy,
yeah,
so like
yeah,
I've always said that for cross training. It's like I always say that like there's not one size fits all, and not just in jiu-jitsu, but all martial arts. It's like if you're learning boxing and you're learning boxing from a heavyweight
yeah.
versus boxing from a bantamweight, you're gonna learn two different ways to
Right.
box. Now, will the fundamentals be there? The jab, the cross, and all? Yes, absolutely. And I would say like if you go to any jujitsu gym, the fundamentals will be roughly the same: armbar, rear naked, passing guard, half guard. A lot of like the bread and butter things might be the same. Where it starts to deviate and where your coach really starts to shine is in their game, extrapolating their game to you. What works for them, their body type. So like I say this, and I don't know if I get flack for this or like because I know some guys at the Wolves Den don't necessarily like me saying this, but like if you're a mixed martial artist, if you're like under 155, go to Wolves Den because they have smaller guys there to work with. And if you're over that, go to St. Charles and May because they got the bigger guys. Now, can you not be a smaller guy at St. Charles and May? Of course you can be. And can you not be a bigger guy at Wolves Den? Of course you can be. I'm just saying that if you're wanting to learn styles that are more conducive to your frame, your body type, be around the guys that are also doing the same thing, right? And like it makes sense that they're head coaches, right? I would maybe think that jujitsu is similar to that because it's still a martial art. If I'm learning jujitsu from Mike Rogers, a hulk of an individual, versus jujitsu from I wouldn't even say you because you're not a small guy, but Jason Powell's smaller than you, I think. So like Jason Powell, that's gonna be two different types of jujitsu. Are they both black belts? Are they both legit? Like absolutely. But are they gonna teach me a different kind of jujitsu? Makes sense of that would happen as well. So like if you cross train, that will only help you because you'll see different variations of the same martial art. Yet, I think jiu-jitsu, you said it yourself, it's like it used to be like forbidden. Now, over the passage of time, it's kind of being less so. But why was it ever like that? Because of the belting system?
I mean, this is just I have no idea, but I imagine, like, say we go back to Rio de Janeiro and there's handfuls of gym, and, like, you run gym, I might actually legitimately know some moves that you don't know. Like, I got some secret shit, because we don't have the internet, we don't have YouTube, we don't have film footage. So I'm like, dude, I got some secret stuff.
You guys legitimately have never seen.
Yeah, and your gym over there probably hasn't seen it. So it's like, kind of got to keep this a secret. But now it's like, any move, it's all out there. Well, you can watch Who's Number One, you can watch YouTube, you can buy every instructional. It's just like, information's
never been more readily available.
Yeah, and probably before that time, it was a little more secretive, a little more like.
So do you think that's where that stems from? The taboo of cross training in jiu-jitsu was more like we were trying to withhold this information with our guys and our group, and then over the passage of time with technology and obviously the growth of the sport, those barriers have just basically been bulldozed through. It's like you said.
Now here's the like other thing that I do see with cross training, the problems that I've seen arise is like with MMA. Jiu-jitsu, I don't think it matters. Like, I'll go to do a jiu-jitsu match versus my best friend, and who cares? But in MMA, we train together. I don't want to fight him. He's my friend. I see that all the time. Like, well, like, you guys are competitors. This, like, do you have a legitimate problem? Like, I see that people start cross training and they don't want to fight each other. And in a small city with a few different gyms, like, how many MMA gyms are in San Jose? Like St. Charles.
Legitimate ones?
Yeah, like,
I would say like 4 or 5.
So say those 4 or 5 guys start cross training, then nobody wants to fight each other.
Fair.
Yeah.
I would also make the argument that then that's on the promotion to not try to match make them. Like, how many fighters could have possibly gone past the local scene but didn't because we spent time losing to one another?
Probably quite a few.
Probably quite a few. So, like, what do all these other promotions, like, if you go to Kansas City, what does, like, Syndicate and, like, FAC do? It was basically, like, FAC was basically Glory versus everybody else from out of town.
Yeah,
right?
I mean, that's how Shamrock kind of used to be.
That's basically Shamrock,
It was Jesse's guys versus
everybody else.
Yeah.
And, like, I think that there's a science to that, to try to promote and get your guys out as fast as possible. So, like, while I can agree with the sentiment you're trying to bring of, like, one problem that can arise from cross training is like suddenly these guys train together, they become buddies. Now they don't want to compete against each other. And if you're a promotion trying to like put on a show, it's gonna get really hard, really fast if no one wants to fight anybody, right? Mm-hmm. But the outside perspective of that is like, should they have ever been fighting to begin with? Like, if we're really, now I'm not saying about amateurs. Amateurs, suck it up, guys, compete against each other. But at the professional level, because now your record is forever, now this matters. I would make the argument like they shouldn't fight each other. Like, have them fight other people. Bring in other people from out of town. Have them fight them. And if they lose to them, okay, whatever. And if they beat them, that way you can get more of the guys from the local scene out.
See, I don't have enough knowledge to know. So say I'm using Shamrock because that's the only like MMA promotion I go. So we have a pro card of 7 or 8 local pro fighters from each card. Is Jesse willing to go pay travel and all that? The 7 or 8 different opponents.
Depends on.
I don't know.
It depends on the guy. So now we're exiting just talking about martial arts and competition and also talking about business. Now,
promotion, that's hard.
Do I think that there's... This is why I do feel for promotions when they're talking about ticket selling, is because like you get a lot of fighters that will sell like 5 tickets and they think that's enough. It's like, guys, I'm not trying to be rude when I say this, like, help yourself by helping yourself. Like, the more tickets you can sell, yes, you're helping the promotion in the short run, but then you're also making sure the promotion is there for whenever you go pro and you need someone to travel from out of town. You know what I mean? Now, should that be on the fighters? I would argue a slight amount, right? So, like, should the fighters have no worry whatsoever about ticket sales? I would argue no. Because if I'm going out there to fight and no one's in the crowd, that says a lot about me. Like, does no one want to see me fight? Am I not entertaining? Is none of this fun? You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. But should I, as a fighter, be worried about cutting weight, preparing for this fight, staying healthy, managing my diet, getting to fight night, being professional, doing all the social media stuff, and selling tickets, and now the promoter is just basically known for what? Just having the, like, buying the cage and putting on a production staff? Like, I think that there is something to be said about what the fighters are responsible for and what the promotions are responsible for. That's a separate argument. That's a separate discussion. But for what you're saying right now, like, should the onus of travel be on the promotion? Fuck yeah. That's a part of doing business. Like if I'm selling steel, do I bitch about having to buy the components to make steel? No, that's how I make my product. So like if Shamrock or NFA or FAC, whatever local promotion you want to say, if their product is fighting, get fighters. And if the fighters around town are like, no, I don't want to fight one another, okay, then get fighters from out of town. Like I don't think it's irresponsible for fighters to be like, no, I don't want to fight the other local pro. Not because I think I'm lose, or not because I'm scared of him, because I want to see him fighting someone else from out of town, and I want to fight someone from out of town, so we can both make it to the show. I'll fight this guy in the UFC or Bellator or ONE FC or whatever. I don't want to fight him for Shamrock, and then only one of us possibly makes it.
Yeah. I just even like thinking of the headache of being the promoter, to handle all that, just I want no part of.
It's easy for me to say. It is so hard. Dude, I can speak. I talked to Rob Donaker and Jesse Finney. Rob Donaker is the matchmaker for Shamrock, and Jesse Finney's the president. I talked to Marlene Kelly and Brad Carey, similar. Like Marlene's like the owner and matchmaker, and Brad's kind of like works in tandem with her. I spoke with Chad Mueller extensively about his kickboxing Muay Thai show, and let me just say, promoters could also be on this podcast and bitch about fighters, and I would have to agree with them.
Yeah,
Fighters being unprofessional, fighters, signing on the dotted line, then wanting to change something, or agreeing to money and then wanting to change something, and then, or 1 week out, suddenly, oh, my coach can't make it, I don't have a corner, so I can't come.
Yeah.
It's like, do I think the promotions do everything perfectly? No, I think there's room for them to grow.
Right.
Vice versa. Do I think fighters need to grow the fuck up? I do. The only caveat in that is, once again, the fighter is like, they're not making a whole lot of money from this. And by the way, neither are the promotions. So I think we would actually benefit from like having promotions do like a seminar of like what goes into this so that fighters can appreciate it, and vice versa. Promoters and matchmakers actually legitimately listen to fighters, because there's some grievances on both sides.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? If this guy is taking on like a $40,000 debt load to do one show and you sold 5 tickets, I think he has the right to be a little salty about it. If you're a pro, if you're an amateur, kick rocks. You don't cost them anything, right? Vice versa, if you're a fighter and they're putting on the show and all this other stuff, and you're cutting weight and you're not saying no to opponents, like you're easy to work with, you're doing all the social media stuff, they should cut you a little slack too on ticket sales, right? Because you're doing everything else appropriately. Let me ask you this. If you were a promoter, what kind of fighter would you want to deal with? Would you want to deal with the consummate professional who can't sell tickets? Or would you want to deal with an absolute asshat who's unreliable but sells 100? What would you rather deal with?
Oh, man, I want the for sure thing.
Exactly.
When you said the asshat, all I thought was Augustine on that one.
Yeah. Yeah. Shows up, doesn't make weight, fights off. Imagine that promotion in Canada who pays for Augustine's travel, pays for his hotel and all that stuff, and then the fight falls through.
Sorry, I'm bringing that one back up. But
well, let's add a little context to this.
Yeah.
A while back ago, Josh is fighting at 145.
Yeah.
And he's talking a whole bunch of shit to his opponent. Yeah. It's for some promotion out in Canada. Mm-hmm. They do a press conference, they do all this other stuff, which I think is cute. Have at it. Josh, after talking all this shit, shows up like 6 or 7 pounds overweight to the official weigh-ins, and then asks his opponent to like, hey, let's do this fight at like 150 instead of 145. Yeah. And his opponent's like, dude, go fuck yourself. I'm here. I showed up on weight. I did everything I was supposed to. No. Yeah. Right?
Well, I agree with the guy. I wouldn't either.
I agree with him too. Why? Why? Are you amateur or are you a professional? Professional, not in just title only, but also through action.
Right. I was willing to try to fit this in. Like, he wanted to fight me, so it's like, am I afraid to fight him? Not really. Like, I've had a lot of like, what is the chances that I take 8 weeks off my life, train, maybe I hire someone to teach my classes for me, pay him $100 a week. The purse is probably gonna be small, all right, and say I dedicate all this time, and
Dude,
Josh
you'd lose money,
and then Josh doesn't show up.
Yeah.
I was like, the only idea that I flirted with him in my mind was like, you put a $10,000 retainer where if you pull out,
Like put it in escrow and like
Yeah,
if you don't show
something.
up, I get that money.
something. But it was just like, yeah, I could invest this time.
I'm willing to hold on to the funds for you.
Yeah,
I'll do it for
like,
free.
And not even talking like he's this pretty unreliable guy.
I don't know if Josh has got 10 grand.
No, probably
liquid
not.
cash.
I don't know. Maybe he does, but like,
Not to freely give up.
no. But you want to agree to fight me on this date, and then you don't show up?
I think what you're trying to say is you're at where you're at in your life right now. To commit to a fight camp is actually detrimental to your finances because you're running a business.
Yeah.
So it's a huge commitment, not just in time,
Yeah.
but your time is quite literally money.
Even if the fight happened, for sure thing.
Yeah.
And then it actually happening is less than 50% in my mind. Because I don't know how many times I've seen that guy not actually fight.
Well, I have a group chat with some fighters, and when that happened, I wasn't even I didn't even know he had a fight.
Yeah.
But when he missed weight, someone put it on the group chat, and I was like, oh, okay. So then I went down the rabbit hole of like, then I saw the press conference, a lot of shit talking, all this other stuff, and all I could think to myself, the very first thing I thought to myself was, well, of course he didn't make weight because he's been on fucking steroids for the last year. He was fighting at like 170 and shit.
Personally, I think it was like, I actually was placing a bet why the fight wouldn't happen with one of my friends. And I let that guy take the first. He said wait, and I was like, well, I'll go passport issue.
Okay.
So I lost that bet. But yeah, I mean, the chances of the fight happening are zero. And the other thing that I don't get when you're trying to be like a tough guy, you're out of prof guy. If you try to get up and act like you're gonna fight the guy, you know no one actually ever fights at those. People get between you.
It's also stupid because you know that if you do,
Yeah, you're
the
not
fight's
fighting.
off.
So why are you pretending like you're gonna fight?
You know, the 125 Brazilian fighter Makayev, the reason he didn't get re-signed to the UFC is exactly that. So apparently, as word is around the grapevine, he's a phenomenal fighter. He's undefeated. He's undefeated in the UFC. He's great, right? But outside of this, it's like about how hard is it for the promotion to deal with the guy. The guy's getting in fights at the PI. The guy's getting fights at the hotel. The guy's getting fights during the press conferences and stuff like that because he's seeing his opponent and he can't hold his temper. So he's going up there and he's actually putting his hands on this guy. So like you're the UFC and you're like, dude, this guy is like one bad scenario away from actually getting into a fight with his opponent. Now the fight is off. We lose a fight on the card. Like talking about professionalism, like back to your point of like whenever you see fighters stand up and like start walking to each other, it is with the express interest that someone breaks this up because neither fighter wants to actually do this and possibly risk the actual fight because now no one gets paid.
Yeah, you're gonna fight tomorrow.
Yeah, which is always weird to me because like I never got mad at someone talking shit because it's like fighting is the one sport where you can talk shit because at the end of the day you get to punch me in the face.
Yeah.
It's not like basketball where it's like, oh, I'm gonna dunk harder than you tomorrow. What the fuck? So
yeah, in fighting you can't be like, well, I would have beat your ass. Like, no,
well,
you wouldn't have.
you have the opportunity. How'd that one work out for you? I don't know, man. So is the gym like what you want to do like for the rest of your life? What's the goal like business wise? Because obviously you got Arnold BJJ. Do you want to like have franchises?
Yeah, I want to grow it. Bring up a few belts and hopefully form a network of gyms and grow it from there. As far as setting long-term goals, I'm not a great like long-term goal guy. My whole life I've been like people would always ask like goals short-term. Like I got things in mind, but I've actually had like real conversations. People talk about, hey, you gotta set goals. I'm like, I just like to go in that direction and see what plays out.
That is completely opposite from me.
Yeah, I could see that.
Completely opposite from me. But obviously it's working for you, dude. You're an entrepreneur. You got your own business, and it seems to be flourishing. You've been doing it for the last 7 years. So I mean, you're doing something right.
I think when it comes to running, all you gotta do is like care. I tell people that want to do their own gym or coach, I'm like, you don't even have to be like world champion or this. Like, if you care, that takes you pretty far.
When I started this podcast, one of the things that a buddy of mine who's like, I wouldn't say he is a mentor. He's a mentor. One of his first questions were like, well, what's the monetization strategy? Like, how are you going to, you're pumping all this money into like hardware and staff and all this other stuff. When are you going to start making money? And it was like the one time, I have other businesses where that was like more but that's because we also had like more employees, more everything, right? So like the overhead was more, so we had to make sure we made money. But this one is completely like, I'll be honest with you right now. At the current run rate, if we don't make $1 doing this, I can maintain this forever. Like I can just pay for this out of my own pocket, and it's like a hobby of mine, right? But I told him, I was like, if I chase money, the product will suffer because I'm no longer doing this because I want to or because I enjoy doing it or that I care about doing it. It'll start feeling like a job if I chase money.
Yeah.
But if I chase the product, if I try to make the product as good as it can be, as lighthearted or as serious, money will always come if the product is good. Regardless of what that product is. It could be jiu-jitsu. It could be a podcast. It could be a can of soda, whatever. If the product is good, money will come. But in the endeavor to chase money, the product might suffer. But if you chase a good product, the money will come.
Yeah. 100%.
I could be wrong. I mean, so far I've not been proven wrong, but I could be wrong.
If you try to make things interesting, it's going to get weird.
Yeah, I don't want to... Trust me, dude, I'll tell you this. I won't tell you names, but like I've had guests give me advice.
Yeah.
Some of the guests are in no position to give me advice, but they give me advice regardless. Yeah. Some guests tell me like some of the podcasts are too long. They're like, oh my God, 2.5 hours. Aaron, I can't listen to that. I go, okay, well then
turn it off.
But that episode's not for you.
Yeah.
I was like, I'm not making a podcast where everyone's gonna. I watch podcasts, right? Yeah. I don't watch everybody's episode of any podcast. Yeah. I look at the guests, I look at what they talk about, and I decide whether or not I want to look at it. Joe Rogan, All In Podcast, what have you. You know what I mean? Yeah. I'm okay with someone looking at an episode and be like, nah, I don't really like the guest. I don't really care about jiu-jitsu. Yeah. OnlyFans. Okay, like I don't really care as long as I'm talking to people that I want to talk to when I want to talk to them. They want to talk to me. They want to be on. As long as like everything else is kosher, I'm happy with that. But I've had a lot of people like tell me episodes are too long. Why do you have this kind of guest? You shouldn't give this guy a platform. And I'm just like, that's funny. Or they'll tell me like, you should do this, that, or the other. And then when I tell them no, they get like a little like offended. They're like, oh,
you think I'm an idiot?
Yeah, or something like that. And I, you know what I tell them? My response is,
do your own.
Do your own. I said, do it yourself. You know what? If you think it's such a great idea, do your own podcast and do your idea.
People have told me things to do with my gym, and I'm just like, well, you can do your own.
Yeah, it's like
nothing wrong with that.
Yeah, and here's the thing: I can't stress this enough. It's not that I don't want constructive criticism. I listen to everybody. Yeah. My thing is when I tell them yes or no, their reaction sometimes puzzles me. Like, did you think that you were going to say something and I was going to fundamentally change how I'm doing this? By the way, not just the podcast. I have other businesses I run. It's in every industry, like regardless of you have it in jiu-jitsu, I have it in this, I have it in other things. So I it's funny to me how everyone seems to have an opinion on how things should be done, but then might simultaneously be the last person to like get up and actually do it.
Yeah, I know when Adam Meredith was doing his, like I'm like I don't. Just because he did the outside perspective or whatever.
Oh, his podcast.
Yeah, and I was like, I don't want to tell you how to do anything, but I just suggested a few people, like people I've met. I'm like, dude, I think he did
podcast guests.
Yeah, I'm like, I don't want to tell people how to do anything, but like
that's completely different.
Yeah,
because you're trying to help him. Like, hey, this person might be interesting. Yeah. I've never like been like I've always said yes or no when people say that. You know what I mean? But even then, sometimes they'll be like, you should have this person on. I go, they're not really that interesting to me because at the end of the day, I'm the one who has to sit down and have a conversation with them.
You know, sometimes I do with like even like Rogan or other podcasts. I look some dude up that I'm like, that I would not be into it, but then I listen to it, and sometimes I am. So sometimes I try to like actively find stuff that I'm like not interested in. Like the time he had like a beekeeper or something.
I listened to the exact same one.
I was like, this is actually
pretty interesting. It was a fascinating episode.
And the most recent one, he has a guy that was Hitler's medic or whatever.
I haven't seen that one.
It's like the most recent one. It's pretty interesting. He like went through the history of Hitler's drug use. He was like his personal.
He was like on a cocktail of things.
He was on everything. Yeah.
Dude, yeah, of course. Like you fucking going out and having rallies and never sleeping in World War II and everything leading up to it. Mm-hmm. Kirk, I don't know. All I know is you've been in business for 7 years, doing something right. The entirety of the time that I've known you, you've been nothing but pleasant and respectful. That's why I just found the whole Augustine thing to be kind of shocking more than anything because I can't see a series of events.
Oh yeah, he said I talked shit on Sean Woodson. I want to know what I said about Sean. He fought Colton Cole, and I said he grabbed the fence in one of the fights, but
that was literally 7 years, 8 years
yeah,
ago.
I guess that's it. Sean's always been nice to me. I got nothing. It's awesome that he's doing well.
It's the mark of a weak man to bring other people into a fight.
Yeah.
Anyway, before I end this podcast, man, is there anything you want to talk about or discuss? Bring up? Plug? Maybe a new podcast?
Yeah, I don't know about that.
Ghost hunting with Kirk Huff.
Are you retired from MMA?
I don't know. You brought up a good point when you said the amount of this is going to sound douchey, but this is how I look at it. The amount of money that I would have to give up because of the time.
Doesn't add up. Yeah.
Because of the time it takes to train and do all these other things. I'll tell you off air what my hourly rate is, and then you'll be like, why would you ever fight again? You know what I mean? But that's the logical side of me. And within me, there are two wolves. One is logical. The other one decides to get into a cage and fight half naked. So how logical am I, right? So then there's this other part of me that, like, when I go to NFA, when I go to Shamrock, I'm not going to lie to you. I get the fucking itch because I'm 31 years old. Like, how hard would I have to train to get back into shape? Maybe a couple months. So, like, realistically, could I have a fight? Yeah. And realistically, could I mop the floor with a lot of the local guys? Yeah. I lost to the guy who's the #1 ranked bantamweight in the world now. Not a bad loss to have. But I didn't retire or quote unquote stop fighting because I lost. I stopped fighting because I had a baby. I was getting married. I want more kids. I wanted to start businesses, and I was spending 3 to 4 hours a day training, Monday through Sunday. I just didn't have the time. And right now, some of the businesses are some of them run themselves, right? So like I'm now hands off because I spent the time to build them up. But then things like this podcast, this takes me like 10 hours a week. And I know that doesn't seem like a lot. 10 hours a week is a lot of time for me. I could be doing other things with that time, spending time with my family, whatever. And that's the thing is like opportunity cost. What am I giving up for fighting? Do I want to do it, Kirk? Yes.
Yeah.
I want to get in there so fucking bad. But is it responsible for me to give up the time and the money away from my family, away from their coffers, what we could do with that, to fight because I want to be selfish and I want to fight?
You know, you can't measure the cost of regret though, because like I'm like in 10 years from now, and I'm like, man, I should have did something. One goal that like I always kind of was in my mind with him is like I wanted to fight for a bigger promotion. Didn't ever happen. Like if I dedicated my whole life now to make it happen, could I? I think it probably could. But like in 5-10 years from now, am I gonna be like mad at myself that I didn't push then, or maybe even now to do it? Maybe, but I guess that's like the cost of living, you know.
You are bringing up something that I think about because I know that how close I am. I could come back, and if I get 2 or 3 wins, dude, if I get 2 wins, I can get like a Dana White's Contender Series or something. That win did not set me back a whole lot that loss did not set me back a whole lot, to be honest with you. I still had people calling me. I'll be completely honest with you. The cards are still on the table if I want them to be. However, for what? For what? To say I fought, like let's say I go back, I win 2 fights, and dedicate the time and resources and everything to do that. And let's say the stars align, I get a fight at the UFC, and I have now fought at the UFC. Okay.
Yeah, the people that I've talked to, it doesn't seem like it like in my mind, because I haven't attained it, it makes it feel like I'd have a certain amount of happiness saying that. But the people that have, it doesn't seem like it really did that much for them.
I'll tell you why it doesn't matter to me anymore. Because I'm not as hungry.
Yeah.
When I was like 26, that's all I cared about was getting to the UFC. Not because I wanted to get to the UFC, because I wanted to be the best in the world, and the best in the world were in the UFC. It had nothing to do with the UFC. You could change it to ONE FC. You could change it to PFL. If that's where the best fighters were, if that was the premier organization, then that's where I wanted to go, right? It just so happens that it's the UFC. The money was good because the money I was making at 26. Well, now the money's laughable. And it's not, like, no offense to any fighters. I love all guys, like, with the exception of guys that take steroids and step in that cage, I respect all these fighters because it takes a lot of like balls to step in there and expose yourself to the world, right? However, in where I'm at in life right now, with the options that I have and what I can be doing, I'm just not as hungry for fighting because there's other things that I can do. I said it to Adam Marburger, and I'll say it to you. I don't think I was competitive because I fought. I fought because I was competitive. And because I'm no longer fighting, that competitive spirit is I'm still competing, but just in other avenues. I'm competing in business. I'm competing with my peers in a different sport, in a different landscape. So in a lot of ways, I'm still getting all of this. I'm still getting all of this through and like feeling fulfillment in my life. That being said, I'll still go to a fight and I'll look at some of these bantamweights and I think to myself, I'll fucking destroy you, kid. You know what I mean? And that's me at 31.
Mm-hmm.
When I'm 41, maybe I'll look back and be like, well, I could have done it. I guarantee you, Kirk, by the time I'm 41, the last thing on my mind will be fighting. And if I'm not on like some private jet going somewhere, then I did something wrong with my life. I'm not trying to sound like a douche when I say that, but that's the goal now. I'm trying to create something for my family that will outlive me. And you can make the argument that a legacy in sport will outlive me.
No, people forget that shit.
But yeah, well, also my kids won't be able to eat that.
No.
You know what they will be able to eat? Everything that a trust fund will afford them and all these other things. I want to change. You know, my family, my mom and dad could have stayed in communist Albania even after communism fell, and they could have stayed in that country because that's what they knew. Instead, they made the ultimate sacrifice, came to America, and chose their kids over themselves. And in a weird way, that's what I'm doing. Like, I could choose to fight, but then I'm choosing myself over my children, over their legacy, what they're going to have, and I'm not going to do that. At this point, even if I want to, it's no longer the right thing to do, as shitty as that is to say.
No, I don't blame anybody for not fighting.
You gonna step back in there?
I'd say it's more unlikely
than likely.
Yeah.
What would it have to take?
I don't know. I just like enjoy jiu-jitsu so much. Like, probably, I always put even pressure on myself. Jiu-jitsu recently, like I've done well. It's like win, lose, or draw. I don't give a shit. At the end of the day, I'm like lose, like yeah, whatever. It's like
I have thought about doing jiu-jitsu competitively.
It's fun. Like the risk of injuries, obviously significantly less. There's not that buildup of like 6 weeks of this one goal. It's like if I mess up and lose a match even this weekend, I can go do it next week and make up for it. I'm like, that was just a bad match.
No,
and MMA, you sit with that shit for months. You're like,
you probably also don't cut as much weight, so it's less stress on your body and your lifestyle because you're not necessarily worried about the head trauma or any of these things. I want to do at least one competitive jiu-jitsu match to see if it stirs anything in me. But can I be honest with you, Kirk? I don't think I can dedicate more than like 3 hours a week to training. That's a 3 to 5 hours is like the free time I have on my calendar now.
Probably do.
I think I could do it.
Yeah.
I would have to do it at like, I'm never seeing 135 again, and probably not even 145. So if I decided to compete, I walk around like 175. I'd probably have to do it at 55.
I don't even like, because I've competed like medium heavy at 95, and I've been all the way down to 62, and I do significantly better at 95.
Really?
Yeah.
Fuck.
I have a hard time dealing with the speed of some of the lighter guys. I can get thrown around just fine. But like
here's my problem. Here's my problem, though. Because my belt is shit, it's like, if I compete, it has to be against, like, it can't be belt-based.
Right.
Does that make sense? Yeah. It would have to be, like, me against someone else who's been doing jiu-jitsu for at least 11 years, 12 years.
Or another, like, guy with a big MMA background or
a guy with a big MMA background.
We'll set it up. Meredith's doing that card. Get him a match.
I am willing to compete in jiu-jitsu. I just want them to know that I'm not willing to train for it. But I'm willing to compete.
I'm making a mutual agreement that neither one of us can train, but I'll meet you there and do it. You have to send me pictures of you not training.
We both agree to not prepare for this fight. A gentleman's bet.
A gentleman's bet. No training, dude. I saw you go on the Club Fitness, and you better turn around.
Brother, I will. I promise you I'll have Taco Bell at least 3 nights out of the week. Well, Kirk, I appreciate you being on Easy Talk, man. I hope this was...
It was fun.
I hope it was what you thought it would be.
Yeah, cool.
Thanks, brother.
No problem.